So, what if I told you that one of the most masterful songs in animated history was written for a Lorax movie? There are no masterful songs in a Lorax movie. Exactly. Because the song was never put into the movie. And as always, that single fun fact sparked a line of thought that ended with me throwing myself down into a rabbit hole of day-long existential crisis, only for me to abruptly hit the ground, crawl back up, rub my sore butt, and realize, oh yeah. We always hear about the inspiring and emotional stories about that one time when a greedy evil studio executive almost screwed over their magnum opus, only for the creative team to persist and triumph at the end. Like that time when Jeffrey Katzenberg tried to ruin Toy Story by trying to remove childlike wonder from it because he deemed it too sappy.
Very early mornings we would pitch it to Jeffrey Katzenberg, and then he would rip them all apart.
Jeffrey Katzenberg, who at the time was chairman of the Disney Studios, would always be pushing for what he called edge. And the Woody character became wildly unappealing at one point.
Or that time when Jeffrey Katzenberg tried to ruin The Little Mermaid by trying to remove a part of your world because he deemed it too boring.
A child dropped their popcorn box, or the container of popcorn, and became restless with needing to clean that up. And Jeffrey took that as a sign.
I came out of that and just said, don't think this is working.
He said, maybe we should lose the song. Howard's in horror, we're in horror.
To me, it was the last thing I thought possible.
I was, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? You know.
I was, what? So that's it?
Hey, say whatever you want about the guy, but for a second there, can you imagine any current Disney studio head ever sitting down and verbally admitting to being a idiot?
This story is true and deeply humiliating, but we'll tell it.
Can you? Triumphant stories like these are like folk tales to movie lovers, but what about the other side of the coin? Because there has to be one, right? Makes you wonder about the times when the creative team did not, in fact, persist and fell victim to the pressure. How many times what are now known as bad films have been screwed over by rejection of potentially groundbreaking creative decisions? How many times have the greatest movies of all time never been made?
Can't imagine the movie without it, can you?
The Renaissance era of Disney was a beautiful exception where a group of writers could get their pens to harmonize with beautiful tunes and melodies overheard from across the hall on a daily basis.
As they went to work in their little music room at the studio, it was like people listening in on the door.
They would be off in a room, sitting at the piano, making up songs.
This music is Alan Menken composing for The Little Mermaid, but we shouldn't.
So when they're working on Under the Sea, you hear times
when a single songwriter could inspire his fellow artists, defining the fate of the script, defining the film, defining the studio, defining the history of film. No one's ego got in the way because everybody recognized and respected the visionary when they saw one.
These are great songs. I have to go work on that movie.
There was electricity in the air. I mean, there was real genius at work and people knew it.
When true artistry was in fact rewarded and soulless corporates were rebelled against. But this video is not just about shitting on evil studio executives. We've got plenty of that already. It's about the complexities of creating something magical in an environment where no one believes in magic. Nowadays, there's always a question of why is this obviously boring, uninspired, or even untalented filmmaker doing so well in the industry? And that's because most media of today is created with the mindset of just show up and do it. In this heavily numerically motivated industry, things like passion or vision are not measurable enough to be counted as dependable metrics. Hollywood is so clinical when it comes to hiring and acknowledging their talent that only people that do get rewarded are the ones with the most clinical and soulless approach to their craft. Therefore, most people are hired and valued based on competency. Now you're probably asking, what is wrong with showing up and being competent? I wish more people actually showed up and were competent. But that is the reason why there is a slight but highly complex difference between a competent film and a great one. Every great film is competent. Not every competent film is great. problem with most competent creatives is that they know exactly how to do a job just well enough, how to do a well-executed technical work. However, having any type of vision or passion towards the project becomes trivial and simply something that makes getting their paycheck even more of a hustle, so why bother? Even the people we know for a fact that are capable of the highest degree of artistry are now just competent at best, because that is what's pretty much rewarded, encouraged, and not to lie, pretty fucking comfortable, so why bother? Which essentially implies the assassination of countless of inspired souls that are employed behind them, which makes it feel like there's no art or beauty or talent left. However, artistry never left, it just got shadowed for a while. It's still there, writing songs, making stories, drawing, animating as we speak. The truth is, there's almost always someone who's trying, wanting, and fighting to make something work. We only ever hear or imagine those stories to be bigger than life, tragic, and soul-shattering. However, most of the time it probably happens so often on such small scales that only the person it is probably happening to is aware of what could have been. That person doesn't have to be in charge, does not have to be a director or a writer. It could be an insignificant animator, that one single passionate visionary behind a computer who sees the project as something more than just a set of deadlines. A single songwriter who writes masterpieces like Biggering for films like Lorax, when in reality even the writers did not give a shit about that film at the time. There are countless of Howard Ashmans out there today. That hasn't changed. The piano down the hall is still playing the songs that could potentially define humanity for the next millennia. However, there's no one listening anymore. Now imagine a scenario where the filmmaker is a conductor to the film crew's orchestra, and the film is a resulting noise. The guy on the left could be performing one of the most groundbreaking compositions ever heard on a trampoline, but if the entire orchestra is out of tune with one another, or all playing separate different melodies, their individual effort, no matter how masterful, is rendered irrelevant, since the resulting sound in the grand scheme of the orchestra is no music, it's noise. All the work, effort, art, and beauty found in each separate artist lost to the deafness of the conductor. The girl over there could be revolutionizing the very concept of a triangle, but no one gives a fuck because maestro is JJ fucking Abrams. I'm shouting, it's like literally 5 a.m. It's paradoxic and it's enigmatic, but this is what makes a whole greater than the sum of its parts. The mythical divide between a competent film and a great film is filled by a certain symmetry, cohesiveness, and harmony that is offered by uniquely fantastic minds of multiple different artists working alongside each other as equals despite the obvious present hierarchy and structure. Hence, one of the most overlooked aspects of filmmaking is the fact that essentially stripped down to its very basic concept, it's pretty much a glamorized group project. It's kind of insane how many people should turn their antennas and tune them to the same wavelengths in order to deliver a cohesive result.
Andrew, Pete, Joe, myself, our story team, our editorial team.
And so we just really went 100% with our gut.
Everybody's helping everybody else.
It was like we became one mind in a way.
But the magic starts to disappear when a large portion of those in charge, whom we now call filmmakers, begin treating their crew not as their fellow filmmakers, collaborators, or artists from different professions, but as mere hirees, or worse, exploitable resources. And it's enough to take a single look at how most movies of today look to understand just how much these huge filmmakers respect the artists or their work. The most effective kind of filmmaking happens when a group of people are working towards the same exact goal, with the same vision in mind, with somewhat similar level of passion. But in today's industry, most artists working for overblown, over-budgeted, over-marketed films are seen as necessary formalities rather than genuinely desired contributors. Like, do you think whoever the fuck it is that directed Captain America: Brave New World sat down and thought to themselves, what kind of music do I think is fitting for this artistic passion project of mine that I'm creating? No, they probably emailed some musician that was competent and available enough in the moment and asked them to make them a score for an action flick or something. I haven't seen or heard this movie, but it doesn't matter. I know exactly how it fucking VFX and CGI were once thought of as a whole new art form and a ground for revolutionizing visual storytelling in cinema. But now the relationship between filmmakers and CGI VFX artists is solely transactional, and it shows. Producers and directors hire entire production teams, and the film could be done without them even having a single conversation together. Just send over a single VFX supervisor that will communicate the mere necessities for the scene to work, and that's it. And if you're thinking, well, what's wrong with giving artists creative control and freedom to create art? I'll tell you, having full creative control can be just as big of a curse as having none. You have to understand, you're just, let's say, 1/10 of the whole production. In order for the project to be done well and to be done cohesively, you need guidance, inspiration communicated to you from your fellow artists.
I like hanging out with God. We sit down and we chat and we come up with things, and I like writing actually with him around.
This is the Zimmer process. We have everybody in the room waiting. That's fine. And he's writing on the Casio. Hey, what do you think about this for Jack? I don't think. Well, no, I feel like
we all get together and we start talking about the movie
lyrics, maybe sung slightly different.
with an emphasis on music as opposed to an emphasis on dialogue or an emphasis on images or anything like this. So it's just for everybody to think about the movie in a musical way.
If you pull apart a competent film and compare its individual parts to components of a great one, the chances are you won't be able to pin down the specific difference between the qualities of each element. But once these pieces come together, one of them will score significantly higher than the other, because what individual pieces represent together matters just as much, if not more, than what they are apart. For example, Hans Zimmer's masterful score on its own does not make Pirates of the Caribbean great. The great casting of Johnny Depp as Jack Sparrow does not make Pirates of the Caribbean great. Groundbreaking CGI on Davy Jones's face tentacles isn't enough to make Pirates of the Caribbean great. The script minus Hans Zimmer, minus Johnny Depp, minus fantastic CGI work wouldn't be enough to make Pirates of the Caribbean great. These elements in isolation are a representation and an echo of the project's excellence, but only once you put all those things together do you have an instant classic. Can you imagine how many puzzle pieces have to come and fit together to paint this kind of picture? But we know it's possible because it has happened before, so it can still happen again. But unfortunately, modern filmmakers would rather sit around and wait for the puzzle to somehow miraculously solve itself for them. So yeah, at the end of the day, modern artistic talent is underused while also being overused, rendered inaudible to the whole mess of unguided, uninspired, and disjointed productions that we have unfortunately grown used to nowadays.